Good evening. Tonight we invite you to journey into the realm of the unknown, a place where the veil between our world and the spectral plane wears thin. These are 4 disturbing true stories of paranormal encounters, real experiences with demons, spirits, and ghosts that will send chills down your spine. Each story is different in setting and entity. Some take place in the unsettling quiet of a family home, others in the sterile, echoing halls of a hospital late at night. But all share one thing, an eerie, suspenseful atmosphere that will keep you on edge. So turn off the lights, close the curtains, and lock your doors. This isn't some Hollywood horror movie, this is real life, and believe me, the most terrifying horrors are the ones that actually happened. Hold your breath and prepare yourself. Here are 4 disturbing true scary stories that prove we are not alone. Our first story takes us to a quiet suburban street, the kind of place you imagine would be safe from the things that go bump in the night. But this house held a dark secret, a presence that made itself known slowly, insidiously. From the moment they moved in, the family felt it, a heaviness in the air, a feeling of being watched. Footsteps echoed from the attic when no one was up there, whispers seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Doors creaked open on their own, objects moved without explanation. The family tried to ignore it, to rationalize it away, but deep down, a growing sense of dread began to consume them. They had invited something into their home, something unseen, something malevolent, and it was watching their every move. The family avoided the attic as much as possible. It was a dark, dusty space, filled with the forgotten belongings of previous occupants. But one day, curiosity got the better of the youngest daughter. Drawn by an unknown force, she found herself standing at the foot of the attic stairs. The door, which had always been kept firmly shut, stood slightly ajar. A cold draft seeped through the opening, sending a shiver down her spine. Hesitantly, she took a step closer. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe. The faint scent of mildew and decay wafted from the attic, making her stomach churn. She knew she shouldn't go in, but something compelled her forward, an irresistible pull towards the darkness that lay beyond the attic door. Heart pounding in her chest, the young girl pushed the attic door open with a groan. The hinges protested, as if warning her not to proceed. Dust motes danced in the single ray of light that pierced the gloom, revealing a chaotic jumble of boxes, furniture, and forgotten memories. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed something strange. In the far corner of the attic, partially obscured by a tattered sheet, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its form shifting and wavering like a heat haze. Terror gripped her heart, squeezing the air from her lungs. She couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure turned its head slowly, as if sensing her presence, and she saw 2 glowing eyes staring back at her from the shadows. The girl's blood ran ice cold as she met the entity's gaze. Its eyes seemed to burn with an unnatural intensity, filled with a malevolence that sent a primal fear coursing through her veins. Time seemed to stand still as they locked eyes, the only sound her own ragged breathing. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. The sheet that had concealed it fluttered gently, as if disturbed by a breeze, but the air in the attic was stagnant and heavy. The girl stood frozen in place for what felt like an eternity, her mind struggling to process the terrifying image that had been seared into her memory. Then, with a strangled cry, she turned and fled the attic, slamming the door shut behind her. The family tried to convince themselves that the young girl had imagined the whole thing, that the stress of moving into a new home had gotten to her, but deep down, they knew the truth. The entity in the attic was real, and it was becoming bolder. Objects began to move more frequently, sometimes even flying across the room with unnatural speed. The temperature would plummet without warning, sending chills down their spines. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the entity was trying to communicate with them, to torment them with its presence. The family was living in a nightmare, trapped in a home that had become their prison. The haunting continued for weeks, each day more terrifying than the last. The family was at their wits' end, their nerves frayed, their sanity hanging by a thread. They knew they couldn't stay in the house any longer, but what could they do? Finally, in desperation, they contacted a paranormal investigator, hoping for some kind of explanation, some way to rid themselves of the entity that had invaded their lives. The investigator, a grizzled veteran of countless paranormal investigations, could sense the fear that clung to the family like a shroud. He listened intently as they recounted their experiences, his face grim. When they were finished, he simply nodded and said, "You need to leave. This house is not safe." And so, with heavy hearts and a lingering sense of dread, the family packed their belongings and fled their haunted home, leaving behind the watcher in the attic. Our next story takes us to the sterile, brightly lit halls of Mercy Hospital. A place of healing, of hope, you might think. But beneath the surface, a darkness lingered, a malevolent energy that preyed on the vulnerable, on those fighting for their lives. It was on the night shift that the stories started, whispered among the nurses and orderlies, stories of strange occurrences in room 104, equipment malfunctioning, shadows moving in the periphery, the feeling of an unseen presence. Nurses swore they heard whispers coming from the room, even when it was unoccupied. Patients claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their rooms, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. But these whispers were often dismissed as exhaustion, the byproduct of long hours and the stress of working in a high-pressure environment. But one night, the true nature of the haunting in room 104 would reveal itself. Sarah, a young and compassionate nurse, had just started working the night shift at Mercy Hospital. Eager to prove herself, she volunteered to take on the extra workload, including monitoring the patients in room 104. As she made her rounds, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the room. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if a weight had settled on her chest. She paused outside the door, listening intently for any sound from within. Silence. Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the moon shining through the window. But despite the stillness, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. As Sarah tended to her patients, she couldn't help but notice the strange occurrences that plagued room 104. Machines would malfunction without explanation, only to start working again moments later. Lights flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. One patient, an elderly woman recovering from a stroke, claimed that someone was touching her, stroking her hair and whispering in her ear, even though Sarah was the only one in the room. Sarah tried to rationalize these events, to attribute them to faulty wiring or the patient's medications. But deep down, a growing sense of unease began to take root in her mind. Something wasn't right in room 104, something dark and unsettling. One particularly eerie night, as Sarah sat at the nurse's station outside room 104, she felt a cold spot wash over her. The temperature in the hallway plummeted, and a chill ran down her spine. She could have sworn she heard a faint whisper, a raspy voice that seemed to come from right next to her ear. Suddenly, the door to room 104 slammed shut with a deafening bang. Startled, Sarah jumped to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. She rushed to the door and threw it open, expecting to find a patient in distress. But the room was empty. The patients were all sound asleep in their beds, their chests rising and falling rhythmically. Sarah scanned the room, her eyes searching every nook and cranny, but there was no sign of what had caused the door to slam shut. Shaken, Sarah backed slowly out of the room, her eyes fixed on the empty doorway. She could still feel the cold spot lingering in the air, a tangible reminder of the unseen presence that haunted room 104. Word of the strange occurrences in room 104 spread throughout the hospital, and soon even the most skeptical nurses refused to be alone in the room, especially during the night shift. The patients, too, were on edge. They spoke of feeling uneasy, of seeing things move in the shadows, of hearing voices when no one was around. The once sterile hospital had become a place of fear and unease. As the nights wore on, The activity in room 104 continued to escalate. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered violently, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. Nurses reported feeling a strange pressure on their chests, as if an invisible force was trying to suffocate them. One by one, the patients in room 104 were either discharged or transferred to other rooms, until only one remained. A young man, comatose after a horrific car accident. He lay still in his bed, hooked up to a myriad of machines that beeped and whirred, seemingly oblivious to the dark presence that surrounded him. Or was he? Some whispered that the entity in room 104 fed on the vulnerability of the patients, drawing strength from their weakened states. We're heading deep into the heartland of America for this next story, a place where sprawling cornfields meet dense, ancient woods. It's the kind of place that looks serene during the day, but when the sun sets, shadows twist and turn, hiding secrets best left undisturbed. This is where our next story takes us, a chilling tale from a small town where whispers of strange occurrences in the woods have echoed for generations. Our witness, a young woman named Sarah, grew up on the edge of these woods, always aware of the stories, always a little wary of their presence. But nothing could prepare her for the night she came face to face with the darkness that lurked within those trees. It started innocently enough, a late-night walk with her dog, Max, under a sky full of stars. The air was crisp, the kind that sends shivers down your spine, but Sarah felt safe, comforted by the familiar rustling of leaves and the sound of Max's paws on the dirt path. She didn't realize it then, but that sense of peace wouldn't last. Something was watching them from the shadows, its presence growing stronger with each step they took deeper into the woods. As they ventured further into the woods, the atmosphere shifted. The air, once crisp and invigorating, grew heavy, thick with an unseen energy. Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine, a primal instinct warning her of unseen danger. The playful barks from Max, usually a source of comfort, now echoed through the trees with an unsettling intensity. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But deep down, a growing unease tightened its grip on her. The forest seemed to close in around them, the once familiar path now appearing distorted and menacing in the fading moonlight. The rustling of leaves, once a soothing melody, morphed into whispers, disembodied voices seeming to taunt her from the darkness. Sarah's grip on Max's leash tightened, her heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of fear against the silence of the night. And then, she saw it. A fleeting glimpse of movement in the periphery, a shadow detaching itself from the darkness. Sarah froze, holding her breath, every sense on high alert. Her eyes strained to pierce the veil of darkness, searching for the source of the disturbance. At first there was nothing, just the rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Sarah started to think her mind was playing tricks on her, the weight of the woods finally getting to her. But then, it appeared again, a tall, gaunt figure shrouded in shadow standing silently at the edge of the trees. Its eyes, two glowing embers, pierced through the darkness, fixed on Sarah with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Fear, raw and primal, surged through her veins. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot, her voice trapped in her throat. The figure took a step closer, its form shifting and swirling in the darkness, defying any rational explanation. Sarah's grip on Max's leash tightened, her knuckles turning white. Max, sensing her fear, let out a low growl, his hackles raised. Suddenly the figure lunged, a blur of darkness against the night sky. Sarah instinctively pulled back on the leash, yanking Max out of harm's way. The figure crashed to the ground where they had been standing just moments before. Adrenaline surged through Sarah's body, overriding the paralysis of fear. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her ears, Max's frantic barks echoing behind her. The woods seemed to come alive around her, the whispers growing louder, the shadows stretching out like grasping claws. Branches whipped at her face, thorns tore at her clothes, but Sarah didn't dare slow down. The image of the figure, its glowing eyes and unnatural movements, fueled her flight. She could hear the heavy thud of footsteps behind her, closing in, the sound of something inhuman giving chase. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, a suffocating odor that clung to the back of her throat. Sarah's lungs burned, her legs screamed for respite, but she pushed on, driven by a primal need to escape the nightmare unfolding behind her. The path seemed endless, the trees a dizzying maze around her. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw the figure gaining on her, its form becoming more solid, its features more grotesque. With a final burst of adrenaline, Sarah burst out of the woods, the familiar sight of her backyard a beacon of hope in the darkness. She fumbled with her house keys, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Max whined and barked at the tree line, his body tense with fear. She finally managed to get the door open, stumbling inside and slamming it shut behind her. Sarah engaged every lock, her back pressed against the door, her chest heaving. The sounds of the woods seemed to press against the walls, the whispers turning into guttural growls, the entity trapped outside. Sarah sank to the floor, Max whimpering by her side. They were safe, for now. But the memory of that night, the encounter in the woods, would forever be seared into her mind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of the light. For many, a Ouija board is nothing more than a novelty, a harmless game to play at slumber parties. But for those who have encountered its true power, it's a portal, a direct line to the other side, where entities hungry for contact lie in wait. Tonight's story is a terrifying reminder that some doors are best left closed. We travel now to a small college town where a group of friends, eager for a thrill on a Friday night, decided to tempt fate with a Ouija session. They gathered in a dimly lit dorm room, the air thick with anticipation and nervous laughter. They were just kids, looking for a good scare, completely unaware of the darkness they were about to unleash. As they placed their fingers on the planchette, a nervous excitement filled the room. They started with the usual questions, innocent inquiries about their futures, love lives, and career paths. The planchette moved slowly at first, hesitant, as if testing the waters. But as the night wore on, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The air grew heavy, the temperature noticeably colder. The questions became bolder, more daring, as if the entity on the other side was feeding off their curiosity, their youthful naivete. The planchette moved with increasing speed, zipping across the board, its answers cryptic, unsettling. Laughter turned to nervous whispers, the playful mood replaced by a palpable tension. One by one, the friends started to feel uneasy, a sense of dread creeping in, but they pressed on, their curiosity outweighing their better judgment. And then, it happened. The planchette stopped abruptly on a single word, Zodiac. A chill ran down their spines. None of them had mentioned the word, nor had they been thinking about it. It felt like an intrusion, a name whispered from a realm beyond their understanding. The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of a nearby streetlight filtering through the window. The room felt charged, the air thick with static electricity. They tried to laugh it off, to rationalize the experience, but deep down, a primal fear began to take root. The planchette started to move again, this time with a frantic energy, spinning in circles, almost as if it were trying to break free. The friends watched in horror, their fingers glued to the planchette, unable to tear themselves away. Suddenly the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Screams filled the air, echoing into the night. The friends scrambled for their phones, desperate for a source of light, their hearts pounding against their ribs. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, they realized the air was thick with an unnatural cold, a bone-chilling chill that seemed to seep into their very marrow. A low growl, guttural and menacing, emanated from the corner of the room, sending shivers down their spines. Panic surged through the group, their fear palpable in the suffocating darkness. Then a pair of eyes materialized in the darkness, two glowing orbs that seemed to burn with an infernal fire. The entity was here, its presence undeniable, its energy suffocating. The friends huddled together, their breaths shallow, their bodies trembling, as the growl intensified, morphing into a guttural voice that seemed to claw at the edges of their sanity. "You shouldn't have called me," the voice rasped, each word laced with malice, sending shivers down their spines. "Now you will face the consequences." The shadowy figure began to solidify, taking on a grotesque form, its edges blurring and shifting in the darkness. The friends could feel its malevolence, a palpable wave of hatred washing over them. They were trapped, their youthful curiosity having unleashed something ancient, something evil. One of the friends, overcome with terror, made a desperate lunge for the door, but the entity was faster. It let out an ear-piercing shriek, the sound like nails scraping across a chalkboard, and the friend was thrown back against the wall with unnatural force. The friends screamed, their voices raw with terror, but their pleas seemed to fall on deaf ears. The entity was toying with them, savoring their fear, drawing out their torment. It moved closer, its form becoming clearer, more grotesque with each passing moment. The entity loomed over them, its features twisted in a mockery of a human face, its eyes burning with an infernal fire. The friends huddled together, their bodies trembling, their minds on the verge of breaking. They had stumbled into a nightmare, and there seemed to be no escape. For what felt like an eternity, the entity tormented them, its presence a suffocating weight on their chests. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving behind a chilling silence and the lingering stench of sulfur. The friends, traumatized and shaken to their core, stumbled out of the dorm room, vowing never to speak of that night again. The Ouija board lay abandoned on the floor, a silent reminder of the night they had tempted fate and unleashed a darkness they could never have imagined. They had learned their lesson, but at a terrifying cost. The memory of that night, the chilling voice, the glowing eyes, would forever haunt their dreams. There you have it. 4 true tales of the paranormal, each one a chilling reminder that the line between our world and the other side is thinner than we think. These stories are not for the faint of heart, but they serve as a stark warning to those who dare to dabble in the unknown. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the darkness. These 4 true tales of paranormal encounters serve as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the scariest stories are lurking right in the shadows of our ordinary lives. If you enjoyed this video and it gave you goosebumps, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more eerie tales every week. Don't forget to comment below which story unsettled you the most, or share your own supernatural experiences. We love hearing your stories. Until next time, remember to check those dark corners and listen to your instincts. Stay safe, stay spooky, and good night, sweet dreams.